Welcome back to the Valley to Peak Nutrition Podcast. This week's a little bit different, a little bit shorter, but I still felt like it was something really great to post and that so many people could benefit from. We have worked alongside a brand and a company called Summit Strength out of Australia for a long time now, and we do a lot of their nutrition consulting and see a lot of the folks that they work with for big mountaineering. So, for example, we've had Michael Kirby on who summited Everest. He was a Summit Strength program graduate. We've had other folks from there who've gone to Kilimanjaro and Rainier, so on and so forth. But we have for years done a nutrition Q&A with them every other week on Mondays and recorded them. They've posted them in their group, but I felt like this was a really good one that applied to so many people that listen to our podcast. So we're posting it. We cover a couple of good questions. One is on a new product called hydrogen water. The second is a really good question on carbohydrates and the differences between them and some of the electrolyte powders, like some of the ingredients as far as dextrose or maltodextrin. And so we cover that. And then finally, we talk about fueling and recovery and the amount of time that that should take. So I think there's really great nuggets in this 15 minutes or so. I hope that you enjoy it. We'll see about doing more of these, but at least for this week, we've got this one. Thanks for checking it out. Have a great week. Like we're doing this week, we actually have three great questions this week that folks have written in from your group. And so those are going to be the things that we cover today. And if you have any additional questions after you watch these recordings, or if you think of one on the fly during the week, you can always email us outside of just group times as well. I would be happy to help and support you. Here's the first one. Could you give a breakdown on the product hydrogen water? There's a few people that are continually getting this product marketed to them, and I'm wondering if it helps. So if you're not familiar with what hydrogen water is a product that there's a variety of different brands, but the claim to fame that they are having over this is that it is infused with a hydrogen molecule in everyday water. And you may wonder, well, geez, what sounds so special about that? Well, it's thought that this extra hydrogen that is in this water acts as an anti-inflammatory in the muscle, which is a big deal when you're training. If you're following a progressive training program, you will inevitably create some inflammation in the muscle, and you would want something to help recover that inflammation faster, because that would mean that you can ultimately train more and hit your next training block and continue to get better, continue to improve, continue to recover. So if something like this really worked, it sure would be nice, and it would be something that a lot of people would find advantageous and want to use. But that's the question: does it work? And the answer to that is, of course, no. If it sounds too good to be true, it very likely is too good to be true. And so we have found that you don't need these additional hydrogen ions that are in this water, which is generally pretty pricey. Now, I do think that it's worth covering what can help the inflammatory process that is brought on by training. And the answer there is pretty dang simple. And that is this: you want to follow a nutrition plan that is in alignment with what your goals are and is alignment with your training program. Now, there's a variety of things that could mean depending upon what your training program is, but I would say the sleeper in this category is the nutrients that are found in fruits and vegetables. And that's a very boring answer, I get that, but the things that make fruits and vegetables have unique color and unique properties are the very thing that helps combat that inflammation from training or chronic disease or environmental factors or anything else. And so you want to try to incorporate those as often as possible. Now, the whole eat the colors of the rainbow, which we've been saying for years and years, we've just done a really poor job telling people why and what that means and what benefit do you get from doing that. And each one of those colors represents different nutrients, and those nutrients are responsible for fighting this process that happens from difficult training, where you get inflammation in the cell, and the inflammation needs to subside before you can continue to improve your training process. So I understand that people don't like fruits and vegetables very often, Sometimes I love them, they just don't know how to incorporate them. So, a couple tips I would give you is this. Number one, if you're not a huge fan, see if you can find a way to be sneaky about getting them into your meals. Whether that's through a salad, whether that's using a bunch of fajita seasoning and cooking a dish, whether that's blending it up in a puree and adding it as a sauce, whether that is putting it in a smoothie and creating a fruit smoothie of some kind. There's a variety of different ways that you can get it in if you think beyond just your standard broccoli crown that's got these little, like, lime green florets coming off of it. But definitely worth considering. No, you don't need fancy water. Number two, I'm looking at two different electrolyte supplements. In their ingredients, one says that the carbohydrates come from dextrose and sucrose, and the other says that it comes from dextrose monohydrate and maltodextrin. Is there a difference between the two different blends? I'm getting ready to do a week-long hike. This is a good question. This is a great question. So, j you've if you've listened to us for any amount of time at all, then you understand that we are big fans of these electrolyte products, particularly on the trail when you need quick hits of fast energy. I don't think you need to drink them the entire time that you're out. I think there's times when you don't need them at all, but if you're in a scenario, in a situation where you do need them, we're fans of them. Number 1, it's a really efficient way to pack your food for longer trips. They don't take up that much space, but deliver a ton of fuel in a small package. And there's not very many backpack centric, hike centric foods or fuel that you can talk about with that. The other reason that we're huge fans of these and gummies and dried fruit and some of these fast acting carbs in the right scenarios, not always, but in the right scenarios, is sort of highlighted by this question. When you have different receptors in your stomach that are open to certain types of sugars, but they're not open to other types of sugars. Whenever you are getting sources of fuel from a variety of different types of these sugars, you are getting the best fueling that you possibly can. You're getting the highest amount of uptake at once. If you try to overload all of these receptors at one time, it can only take on so much and it will not absorb the rest, which usually is one of the main causes of GI distress in endurance sports and endurance training and backpacking, etc. So the question that you're asking here by these multiple source carbohydrates is this good? The answer there is yes. It's because you're basically tapping on and calling on every receptor in your stomach to respond and give you the most nutrition that it can in that given portion size. The question is there much of a difference between dextrose and sucrose, which is, let's call it example one, and then dextrose, monohydrate, and maltodextrin? First and foremost, the word dextrose could be used in exchange for glucose. They're essentially one and the same. The question though is there any difference, or are there different receptors in the stomach that can take up dextrose or glucose and that can take up sucrose? And the answer to that is lies in chemistry that I won't bore you with, but it's yes. Those are different types that the body will handle differently and that you will help you to take those up and maximize your fueling opportunity. Now, the question though is what about this outlier, this maltodextrin? Because the other part of that maltodextrin is glucose. Maltodextrin's a little bit unique in that its sort of claim to fame is the ability to fuel high output activities, but to have a lower response in the blood sugar. In other words, what it means is that it it is designed to digest slower and deliver a more elongated fuel as opposed to the quick hit that can sometimes come by these sugars. Now, the reason I'm even fumbling over my words as I describe this is because I know that it's hard to recognize, well, if it's slower to deliver and if it's slower in digestion, how could it possibly fuel these higher intensity efforts? And I would say, number one, it does, but not to remember that the type of product that you're asking about is a combination of dextrose, and maltodextrin. So you are covering your basis with a fast-hitting carbohydrate. You're covering your basis with a somewhat slower, longer delivery carbohydrate, and you kind of get the best of both worlds. Now the question is there a difference between these two products? And is there one that you should lean on based solely on ingredients? And this is, I would say that it comes down to you. In other words, is there one that you like the taste of better? Is there one that sits better on your stomach? Is there one that just does it for you more than the other? Because if the answer to that is yes, that's the one that I would probably go with. There are times when you compare nutrition products where they are all going to be fairly similar across the board, and the difference is solely going to be based off of you. I don't think, and I think this is the heart of your question, I don't think you are going to notice a difference in your ability to complete this week-long hike, to where it comes down to this electrolyte powder. Like, if you had chosen option A, you did really well, but had you have chosen option B, you would have done really poorly. They are both, for the most part, gonna do the same thing, and I think when you compare products like that, then it just comes down to personal preference, whether it's taste, whether it's cost, whether it's how it sits with you, whether it's insert any other potential option there, right? So I don't think that you can go wrong. I'd have to see what's in the actual product I'd be checking things like, does one have more sodium than another? Does one have more carbohydrate per dose than another? Is there one that would somehow cause me to think that it edges the other one out? And if the answer to that was yes, I'd probably lean towards that product. But if the answer to that was no, they seemed, you know, for the most part the same. I'm gonna go solely off of which one sits better with me, what's the taste, and just very subjective qualifiers more so than if there's some sort of a massive difference between the ingredients. Number three, how long after depletion does it take your body to recover? For an example, I did an 8-hour hard backpack where you might not have fueled correctly before, during, or afterwards. What would the ideal full food recovery plan be after depletion, and how many days does it take? So the first part of that question is extremely difficult to answer in the time that we have here. Like, what would the ideal food recovery plan be? That would be based off of the individual. However, as a broader example, you are going to want to ensure that you have sufficient doses of the three main macronutrients. You're going to want carbohydrates to restore lost fuel stores or glycogen. You're going to want protein to recover the muscle. You're going to want some dietary fat to compensate your calorie intake so you don't lose weight, while also transporting nutrients and hormones. The three together are very important in every meal that you eat, no matter what. The dosage of those three nutrients, the quantities that you eat of those at a recovery meal and or through the day and or through your week, will largely depend on you and your personal goals. But you do want all three of those nutrients as a recovery meal and really sort of sprinkled throughout your entire week. Now, to the earlier half of your question is, how long after depletion does it take your body to recover? I would say that's going to be a combination of variables and factors based off of, what is your intake like? What is your training continuing to look like? What does your recovery plan look like? In other words, you could eat all the fuel in the world after a depletion, but if you are hitting successive and ongoing difficult training programs, the body is just going to continue to deplete that. You'll never have the opportunity to completely restore it. And that's why, like, following a good training program, there are periodic and strategic deload phases and recovery weeks to give your body the best opportunity to fully and completely recover from those progressive overloads, so that you can then hit the next training block and continue to peak until you get to your event. If those are spaced well, if you have great nutrition, you have good sleep, you have good hydration, you have recovery days sprinkled in there, you could fully recover. I'm you could fully recover 48 to 72 hours after a really, really difficult hike. Now, Yeah, obviously, that's a very, very broad statement because you could do something like a 100-mile, 20,000 vertical foot hike, and you're going to need to recover for potentially a couple of weeks after that. Now, recovery doesn't mean you just sit on a couch, but it does mean that I personally won't go back into something really intensive and focused for at least a couple of weeks. I'll be very casual about it. I'll still move just to help facilitate blood flow to the legs so I can recover, but I will not be aggressive. And you can usually feel it. And the more experience you get in this, the more that you will be able to feel it as well. But you can generally feel where you start to get over that hurdle of just complete exhaustion. You almost feel like you're getting the flu, but you don't have any flu-like symptoms beyond just excessive tiredness. Sometimes you sweat at night. There's a lot of really bizarre things that happen. So it's hard to give you a really good answer based on that question. But if it's a part of your normal training regimen and it's a difficult training cycle, um, and you're on top of your nutrition, you're on top of your sleep, you're on top of your hydration, you're on top of, hitting periodic recoveries, you could be recovered in 28 hours, 48 hours, 72 at the most. But a key part that is included as a part of that is to be sure that you are on top of all of those things, making sure you're getting sufficient carbohydrate for the training and the intensity, making sure that you're getting plenty of protein for recovery of the muscle, plenty of dietary fat for the transport of hormones and nutrients. You have recovery days sprinkled in, you have good hydration, good sleep habits, you have all of these things in place. If that happens, you put yourself in the best opportunity to recover faster. So I know that's not a great answer, but without knowing, you specifically, and kind of what your training regimen is and how you eat, it's difficult to answer, but I feel comfortable saying that, you know, you put yourself in the best position possible when you're on top of your nutrition, sleep, hydration, and recovery. So thank you for sending in the spectacular questions. We will be back again in another couple of weeks with more of these. You can always write them in. You can join us live. We love them both. Until then, we'll talk to you soon. So there you have it. A couple of little nuggets that I hope you can take and apply to your own training or the trail or what have you. And I know the conversation around the different carbohydrate types can sometimes be confusing. So we created a really small cheat sheet or guide that you can download for free. You will find that in the show notes. But if you have any questions about anything that you've heard or that we covered or about you specifically, you can also always reach out to us at info@v2pnutrition.com. We will be back again in another couple of weeks with more new episodes as well as other great episodes throughout the rest of the year. Hope you enjoy them. Feel free to send us your questions if there's topics you want us to cover. We'll see you again in another couple weeks. Have a great week, everybody.